Hi, this video covers section 3.2 in our course, Shifts in Demand and Supply for Goods and Services. Ceteris paribus. Now, we learned about the demand-supply curve. This is a relationship between two and only two variables, quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. The assumption behind a demand curve or a supply curve is that no relevant economic factors other than the product's price are changing. This is our ceteris paribus assumption, meaning other things being equal. Now, here in economics we can do that, but in the real world things are a little different. In the real world, it's usually hard to isolate all the different variables that may influence or change the outcome of what you are studying and how an individual might make a decision. It's used in economics to rule out the possibility of other factors changing, which may have an impact on the outcome or decision-making process of individuals. For example, let's say that an increase in the price of beef will decrease the quantity demanded for beef. We often add the phrase or assume all else constant at the end. And why? We know from the law of demand that if the price of beef goes up, less beef will be demanded, all else constant. Now assume we take away the phrase all else constant. It now becomes extremely difficult to study the relationship between price and quantity demanded. We open up the entire world to known and unknown factors that may also affect the demand for beef. Our next slide talks about complements. Complements are the goods are often used together because consumption of one good tends to enhance consumption of the other good. A good example would be milk and cereal. Now, if we have an increase in the price of good X, this will cause a decrease in the demand for good Y. If this happens, we can conclude that these two goods are complements. Here's an example. Andy views beer and pizza as complements to one another. If the price of pizza decreases, well, we can assume then that his demand for beer would increase. Our next slide is about shifts in the supply curve. Now, if we have a change in price, this will result in a movement along the supply curve. Changes in other relevant factors cause a shift in supply. A shift of the supply curve to the left or right. So such a shift results in a change in quantity supplied for a given price level. If the change causes an increase in the quantity supplied at each price, then the supply curve would shift to the right. So what are some of these factors? Prices of other goods. The supply of one good may decrease if the price of another good increases, causing producers to reallocate resources to produce larger quantities of the more profitable good. Number of sellers. More sellers result in more supply, shifting the supply curve to the right. Prices of relevant inputs. If the cost of resources used to produce a good increases, sellers will be less inclined to supply the same quantity at a given price, and the supply curve would shift to the left. Technology. Technological advances that increase production efficiency shift the supply curve to the right. And then expectations. If sellers expect prices to increase, they may decrease the quantity currently supplied at a given price in order to be able to supply more when the price increases. Some examples we've seen in our class. When cost of production fall, a firm will supply a higher quantity at any given price for its output. The supply curve will shift to the right. This will cause an increase in supply. If higher wages, which this would be a rise in input prices, if this were to happen, we'd have a reduction in supply. If we have unfavorable or poor natural conditions such as a freeze or a drought, this will decrease supply. This will cause a leftward shift of the supply curve. If we have new manufacturers enter an industry, this will cause the supply curve to shift to the right. We'll have an increase in supply. And that is our video. Thanks for listening.